Welcome to Board Gamers Anonymous, the podcast about board gamers and the insane fun we have at the table together. This is Chris.
Hey, and this is Anthony.
And this is episode 475, Best of Splotter Spellen. We'd like to thank all our Patreon backers for helping us bring you a brand new episode. Hey folks, we are back, and of course, we're talking about the latest and greatest, and for this episode, our feature review is going to be talking about Splotter Spellen. That's a mouthful, Anthony. They make games?
That's what they do. That's what their goal is, I think. It's a funny company, and it always has been a funny company because it started back in 1999 as a group of students who had a bunch of game designs, and they're like, "Oh, let's get together and make a collective so we can publish these things." And they kind of just made them in their garage-ish, and maybe printed some stuff. And they sold very small quantities of these games. And if you go back to 1999, they had like a couple games that really broke out of that, and then a bunch of things that didn't. Like if you look at their ludography on Board Game Geek, it's a lot of stuff you've never heard of, and they'll even say this isn't good. Nobody liked it. But then over the years, they've kind of become synonymous with like the auteur game, right?
Yes.
This is the premium experience, and you know that because it's $150.
Ooh la la! And wait a minute, that was back in the day where games were not $150
right.
normally.
Yeah, it was a box full of stuff that looked like it was made in someone's garage, and it was $150. And they release a new game at this point, like every 5 to 10 years. So it's there's like the mystique around it. Most of their games are out of print all the time, except for like 2 of them. And between us, we've played most of these that exist, and we've played all the ones we're going to talk about today. So we figured, hey, let's run down the best of Splotter and talk about which ones are worth tracking down, which ones to keep an eye out for if they come back in print, because buying them when they're out of print is never worth it. It's so much money. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, they're definitely the company that you should know about because, as we saw recently with Lucky Duck Games, their re-release of Food Chain Magnate just blew up and cost all the monies in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And again, still a very good game. But as Anthony mentioned, they were the company that if you were hip, if you were cool, if you were the know, if you were like the true hipster, you were like, I only played Splotter Spelling games, man. So shout out to our friends out there, especially our friend Chris, who I remember had brought Food Chain Magnate and was like, oh man, I paid $150 and paid like $50 to ship it out from Europe. And, you know, like you said, Anthony, like you open it up and you're like, who made this? Come on. Who made this in their kitchen? Come on. Somebody did this as a school project. Like, no. It's cool, man. It's cool. It's cool, Daddy-O. Like, just sit down and play it. Enjoy. Go with the vibe, man. Like, you're in the know. This is about cardboard, bro. We don't need your plastic pieces here, man.
I love how we're leaning into this like hipster persona that we've developed now. Like,
just for this episode, because you got to get down with it because it's all about what these games are about. And as you said, Anthony, they're like, and I think it's fair to say a lot of these are like intellectual masterpieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
there are some games here that I would consider among the best games ever made, and some two or three of these are in my personal top 100. But like beyond that, like just best games ever made. So we'll get into it. We'll talk about those and why they are that.
Yeah, no shade at all. These have stand the test of the time. Ergo, the episode, my friends, the episode. But before we get into all to that fun stuff going on there, Anthony, what's going on with us?
Well, we got stuff. You know how we are.
Stuff.
We're doing things.
We're cool. We're cool.
Yeah, we're the coolest. So 2 big things you got to know about. One is we do have the video recordings from Long Island Tabletop.
What?
They are in my hands on my desktop, currently in Adobe Premiere processing. So we will have the Level Up Your Tabletop Teach video will be on our Patreon. Well, the video will be on the website. The audio file from that, so if you want to listen to the podcast version, will be on the Patreon this coming week. So keep an eye out for that. We will have that. You'll be able to listen to it on your very own. And then Level Up Your Mental Health will be up the following week. So, and both videos will be up around the same time. So if you want to listen to just the audio, well, you can pop open the video player and do it that way, or you can download from the stream on the Patreon feed. So check those out. These were really great presentations. We had a lot of fun doing them. Very well received. We're excited to share them with you. And you get to hear a little bit of us live instead of this pre-recorded jargon that we're doing now.
Which is also kind of live because we're doing, we're not reading from a teleprompter.
That's true. we hit go, we talk for a while, and then we clean it up a little bit. But
there you go.
See, but these are not cleaned up at all. It's just how it happened.
Crazy. Ooh, yeah, and it was so well done.
Yeah, you'll never know.
You'll never know. And the museum was impressed. They actually recorded it.
Yeah,
They were like, these need to stand the test of time. And we were like, really? And they're like, yes. And I was like, nice.
Yeah, I love it because they were comparing it like, yeah, we've had astronauts in here and we didn't record it. We didn't have it in our archives. I'm like, so you're recording us.
No. We don't have the astronauts. But what we do have is two podcasters talking about tabletop games.
Yes.
Ooh.
What does it have to do with planes? I don't know. It's fine.
We look forward to our future exhibits in the Museum of Aviation.
Yes.
So
yes.
The cradle will now have Anthony and I just standing as wax figures where you could push a button and hear us talk about tabletop games. So
they're renaming it. It's not just the Cradle of Aviation. It's the Cradle of Aviation and podcasting.
There you go. I like that. We're the first inductees, so that's fantastic. Yeah. I'm a big fan of that. I agree.
Yep. We did it.
All right.
So yeah, keep an eye out for those. And then, of course, more info coming on Board Game Academics Conference, which is July 4th in Morristown, New Jersey. But we'll have more details for you probably next week.
Yeah, and it's not just an academic conference. It's also a tabletop convention that's part of Dex Light. So come for the smarty pants stuff and stay for the games and the funs.
Yeah.
Because we'll be there for the entire weekend.
We will. I'm excited. Yes.
Games at the table with people.
I know. Like I'm
in real time. What the heck?
I'm going on this like crazy long family vacation. Which I know a lot of people go on family vacations, but we don't generally go on long vacations. So we're gonna be gone for like 2+ weeks. And multiple flights involved, and beaches, and visiting family, and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm looking forward to all of that. It's going to be amazing. Going back to Seattle for the first time in a long time. But at the end of it, once that's all over, I get to just like go hang out with you guys and play games for 3 days. I'm like, oh, that's going to be such a cool way to end the trip.
Yes.
Very chill.
Yeah. And Chris will be there, and Game Master Dave will be there, and Will be there, and a whole bunch of other people we've had in the podcast before. So if you're local to the area, or if you want to come stay the weekend, it's a great time. And there is also, and Board Game Academics has more details for this, there's also an academic rate. So if you come for the academic conference, you can come for a discounted rate for the whole convention.
Yep.
All right. So that's everything that's going on with us. Anthony, what's going on with our friends out there? What's our question of the week?
Alrighty. Question of the week this week. I asked everybody, so backstory here. I teach I teach a class about board games. And so I have to manage the personalities, and I get to see all the different ways that people engage with games that maybe aren't used to playing games all the time, right? So people get a little salty at times, and I have to manage that in a classroom setting where it needs to be a safe space for everybody. So occasionally I have to pull somebody aside and be like, you need to bring it down a little bit. So it got me thinking, what games, because I was telling a student the other day, I'm like, hey, this happens to me too. I understand. So I asked everybody, what games make you saltier than any other game? What game makes you mad? What game just gets under your skin? And do you avoid playing that game? So we have several good answers. Over on the Patreon, we have a few answers here. We have Adam, who says, any party game with an apples to apples style rotating judge roll. When the judges just reflexively choose a follow-up card they have strong feelings about, with complete disregard for whether it actually pairs well with the initial card.
Agreed.
It's so annoying.
Yes.
That is like, my first lesson in my class is the magic circle. Like, everybody needs to buy into the rules of the game and play them to their fullest. Otherwise, the game does not work. And party games are the epitome of that. If you do not do the thing that the game is telling you to do, then it's just not going to work. So apples to apples is a great example. Like, you have to actually pick the one that's the best answer. You can't just like pick one that's random. The game doesn't work then.
It's true.
So that's a great answer. Whiskey Punk says Cosmic Encounter. 100% agree.
Oh, yeah.
So they say it is such a terrible game that basically plays itself. I've actually won the game twice trying to just end the game as quickly as possible. Those were the last 2 times I've played, and I will never play again.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm pretty sure the last time I played Cosmic Encounter was the same thing. I'm like, "Are we done yet?" I win. "Are we done yet? Can I be done? I don't wanna do this anymore."
You mean a game that either lasts 5 minutes or 5 hours?
You're right, yeah. Like, my favorite is, yeah, like, "Hey, let's play Cosmic Encounter. I picked up my stuff. I got my pieces out. Game's over." I'm like, "What? Oh, okay. That's cool. That was fun." All right, so Drew says cryptid. I love the concept of this game, but have had multiple plays where one person along the way misjudged their own hidden information and gave an incorrect clue. Ruined the game, sold it, and now search for Planet X's reliable substitute. Um, any game with hidden information that relies on players to communicate to each other clearly is a
Ask
recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's asking for trouble, for
Yeah.
sure.
Cryptid, it's one of those games like it's really good if it works. You're like, well, that's not good. Is a
And
game going to
there's
work?
like you said, there's a level of resentment that goes along with that game, like, "How could you give that clue? That clue was ridiculous." You're like, "Oh."
Yeah. Yeah. Nope. I've played several games like that. There's one, it was, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. We did our burn episode. It was on the burn episode. It's a game I burned.
Mm.
Hidden information. If you don't communicate it properly, it breaks the entire game and you waste a half an hour. It's, ugh, not a fan. All right, so that's over on the Patreon. On the Facebook, we got a few more answers. Fed says Euphoria. I think was a combination of someone who manipulated another player doing a move that was good for him, but great for her. We did also help him to find a better move that would benefit. So just generally like people having a bad situation within the game itself. Sebastian mentions the all-timer diplomacy. David, friend of the show, Dave also mentions diplomacy. So lost too many friends due to heavy backstabbing on turn 4. Um, I've never played diplomacy because of these stories.
Yes.
People are like, it ruins friendships. You never want to play games again. I'm like, well, then I won't play that game. Seems like a bad idea.
Yeah. You have a similar situation with Game of Thrones, the board game,
Mm, sure.
because throughout the whole game, I mean, you have to knock everybody out to win, but throughout the game, you have support tokens.
Hmm.
So someone's going to be attacked or someone's attacking, and you have to put tokens out like, "I'm going to back you." And you're like, "But are you?" Like, "Yes." "Really?" "Yeah." And then then they don't back you.
You're like, oh, shock and awe. That wasn't fun at all.
Yes.
I'm having fun now. No, I'm not.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So one more here. Chris mentions Calico. Still playing it, but not finding those last tiles I need is so infuriating. So any game where you need to complete a thing and you have to draw it out of a deck, out of a bag, out of something, I understand that. Um,
Yes.
the game for me that makes me the saltiest, probably everybody knows this already because I've ranted about it enough, is Zaya, Legends of a Drift System. Um,
You don't like going boom?
I don't like flying into the sun. And you know what? I don't need anybody telling me that I could have just not done that because
It's
the
true.
alternative to doing that was just not taking my turn, which is even dumber. I don't know. That was not a fun experience for me either time I played that game. No matter how many things you throw in there, how many ways you tweak it. Like, I don't want a sandbox. I want rules to follow and some system to work through, some objective to follow,
Sure.
something. Like, if I want to wander around doing nothing, I can just go for a walk. I don't know.
Well, that's what happens in space, man. If you want to go to space, I'm just saying.
Yeah, yeah, space is fun. I yeah, no.
Well,
Never again.
speaking of space, I think I have a similar complaint here. Of course, the one that I always rally against is Galaxy Trucker.
Right.
So it's like you go through all this trouble to build the ship, and then a card comes out that says you get hit from a side once or twice or whatever it might be, and that's the whole game. Like, your ship is now floating without an engine or without rockets or whatever it might be, and you just sit there, like literally sit there and wait for the game to play out.
Yeah.
So random build, random play, and you just rally your rage, and it's not fun. Not
No.
fun so much. No.
No, I can see that. At least that one's short. Zaya's like
Is it?
4 hours long. Galaxy
Yeah,
Trucker's like 45 minutes. I mean,
it's true.
it's too long if you get knocked out early, but at least it's not like
But
hours.
the other problem with that game too is you could play it very quick as far as building your ship up, but you don't have fun. Like the
Right.
real fun part of that game, which I completely acknowledge, like I love the idea that you're building a spaceship.
Right.
Fantastic. But you can't dwell over that. You can't take the time to enjoy building your ship because you're going to lose the turn order on that. So, and the turn order is so powerful because those resources come up, and if you're not first, you're last. Like,
Right.
ouch.
Yeah, it's no fun. All right, so thanks everybody who answered to the questions. Adam over on the Patreon, I think got us off with a good start with the party games because I 100% agree party games that people don't buy into or play properly are just inherently broken, and there are some that I just won't play for that reason. Anything apples to apples ish can't anymore. I just can't, especially if there's like a couple playing. Ugh, drives me crazy. It's all in jokes. No one's actually playing the game. It's just they're
Oh,
playing, and the rest of
sure.
us are watching. So,
Yeah.
Adam, you are a winner this week. Congrats.
I think also, again, just a little asterisk here. A lot of the like great games, tabletop games, but when you play them online, and then you find that like you're not there to be able to push other players to do the thing that they need
Mm,
to do, like, hey, that person's running away with the lead, could you do something about that? Doesn't really play well online. So
no, not at all.
all right, so that's everything that everyone else is talking about. And again, as always, if you'd like to hit us up, our website is best. BoardGamersAnonymous.com has all the social media links and everything you want to know about the podcast, articles, everything, all the fun stuff out there. And if you want to just reach out to us through your own systems, Facebook, X/Twitter, what, whatever might be left there. TikTok, I don't know if TikTok's still around. I mean, maybe today, maybe not tomorrow. Yeah. So social media, but again, boardgamersanonymous.com will keep you most up to date on everything we're doing and how to reach out to us. All right. So that's what's going on with them. Anthony, let's talk about the games we want to talk about. Let's talk about our acquisition disorders.
All right. So for me, this is one that you brought to my attention. And I guess I'm just in my head, this game is too new to have an expansion already. And that's Dune War for Arrakis. There is a new expansion that is being teased over on GameFound, Desert War. It's not I don't think it's clear yet when it's going up. I think CMON has their next couple of campaigns already planned, so it's probably going to be like later summer, unless they're going to squeeze it in between now and the DC United stuff. But it is more content for Dune War for Arrakis, which is the big epic two-player game from the designers of War of the Ring, but set in the Dune universe. So this one, it doesn't look to be a big expansion. It looks like what they're doing here is they're going to re-release everything that came out in the original campaign and then have a new expansion on top of that. Because all they've really shown so far for the new expansion is like there's new units. So you've got expert Fremen sand riders, Fremen rocket launchers, and then on the Harkonnen side, you've got Suspensor troopers and escort ornithopters. These are kind of just like advanced, more tactically specific versions of units that we kind of already have, that are designed to do specific things, right? So I don't know that it's going to like substantially overhaul what the game does, which is fine because a game like this is fairly well balanced. If you throw big crazy stuff at it, it's going to break things. The thing I love about War of the Ring is like they spend years building those expansions and they still don't have that much stuff in them because you don't want to break the game. So it's more stuff. I love more stuff. And it's such a big epic experience that kind of tweaking the strategy even a little bit is going to throw people off, and give them a chance to kind of approach it with new eyes. So it looks like they're going to have everything up there though, all the exclusive stuff, quote unquote. Which I kind of wanted to go back and look and see, was it Kickstarter exclusive? Because they always use that term, or did it just say exclusive? Because now we're on GameFound, so just saying. Not to be pedantic, but just saying. Um, it's no longer exclusive to Kickstarter, which is cool though. I don't mind that at all. People, you can pick up the big exclusive box. You can get the Smugglers expansion, which was exclusive. You can get all the little plastic pieces and the playmat. I have all of these things. They look amazing. So if you were on the fence of getting the game because the retail stuff is basically the same price anyways, then this is a good opportunity to pick it all up. That's all we know though. So I'll keep an eye on it. I'll let you all know if the expansion looks worth picking up once they actually release a few more details.
Yeah, it sounds good. I mean, again, it seems to be how they run games now as far as crowdfunding. Like it goes up on Kickstarter, it gets all that marketing, and then short time later it shows up on GameFound. And again, like you said, the exclusives maybe not so exclusive. Sometimes it's a little more expensive to pick up on GameFound, but obviously with Simon's deal now, everything is going to be moving over there.
Right. Yeah, this is like this is like a weird in between, right? They're like, we have one new thing for Dune War for Arrakis. We'll put it up here. You can get all the other stuff as well. Let's see how it performs here. And it makes sense too, because they ran that other campaign over a year ago.
Hmm.
And the movie just came out and made a ton of money, and everybody's talking about Dune over the last couple months. I think it's on streaming, right? Or not streaming, but you can like download it now, and the Blu-ray comes out next week. So Dune is like out there in the ether. People are talking about it. Um, Seems like a good time to drop the expansion. But
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we've seen this with all of the crowdfunding sites where they're like, we want to put it back out again, but we need a reason to. So
right,
here's a tiny expansion so that you can buy the whole game over.
right, yeah, and like the two expansions this game came with were not huge, so this is
Mhm.
probably on par with those. It was like 5 to 10 new units, maybe a couple new mechanics, and so that's what we're getting here. I think like um the Smugglers expansion in particular, the exclusive one, didn't do much.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I want to talk about something that is somewhat speculation, somewhat rumor, but there are signs that this is actually a thing. And in particular, this was caught by someone out there on the internet. Gen Con 2024, one of their events put out information that I don't know, maybe not should have been announced this way, but Star Wars, the deck building game, I'm talking about the board game, not the CCG thing,
Right.
the Clone Wars expansion. So they put out an event to learn to play it, and it's coming from Fantasy Flight. So it seems completely legit. And we've talked about the deck building game. It was one of our favorite games of the year. It plays quite well. It's a very smart, innovative take on the Star Realms kind of gameplay.
Hmm.
And this, along with a bunch of pictures from some store sites in Europe online, seem to confirm that you will actually have uh, they call it an expansion, but really it's a standalone expansion. So you could play this as its own game because it's the Separatists versus the Republic, if you know anything about Star Wars. And a lot of pictures. You got Kenobi, you got General Grievous, you got Jar Jar because I guess you have to. And Camino, Geonosis, you have basically all the places, all the people, all the ships, and this is kind of cool. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the prequels, but this is more of a very good game. And now it seems like, of course, you should be able to mix both games. So you could play the Separatists versus the Empire, or the Republic versus the Rebel Alliance if you want. And again, seems like fun. Seems like it's coming soon because again, there'll be plays of this at Gen Con.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, the standalone expansion thing is a little disappointing to me because there's so many characters and potential things that we haven't seen yet for like the Rebellion era stuff. Um, but more at all is good. That means they're continuing to develop for the game. That's great. I thought they were just going to let it die. So
Yeah, after the CCG came out, it seemed like why would they? But maybe they sold so incredibly well. And again, it's a fairly inexpensive game. I think it's like $20.
right.
So that's always nice to see because a lot of people could use a very good two-player game. And who knows? Maybe there's some stuff stuck in there that the game pictures don't show. Maybe there's a way to play with 4 players. That would be nice.
Yeah, that'd be
So,
cool.
yeah. So we're looking forward to it. All right. So those are the games that we want to get to the table. Let's talk about the games that did hit the table. And we'll let you know if those games are a buy and you should run out and pick those games up. If those are games or a play and you should sit down and enjoy them. or if those games are a dodge and you should avoid them, or in fact, the games of the dreaded burn and you've cried enough tears about it, so just toss it out the closest airlock. Anthony, what'd you play this week?
All right. So Nucleum has a new expansion, Australia, and it's a weird one because they announced it maybe a week or two after the game came out. So it was not even quite the end of the year, and they're like, "Hey, new content for Nucleum coming." I'm like, "We just got this game." Um, so it had been out for a whopping 2 or 3 months. So obviously, this was already in development, um, and it's out now, and I got a chance to give it a go. It's really the word expansion is probably a little much. It's an expansion in the same way that like a new Concordia map is an expansion or a new Power Grid map is an expansion. It's a new map, which means new space to manage, and there are a couple of new mechanics, and that's pretty much it. And that's not a bad thing because Chris, you and I were talking about this before the podcast. This game already has a lot of mechanics, so if they just started layering more stuff on top of that, it might be a little much.
A
So
lot of actions. A lot of actions.
yeah, so I'm glad all they really did was add one action, one and a half maybe. Um, they didn't really remove anything. Nothing's replaced. So let's run through really quickly because it will be really quick. It's not a complicated update. So you have a map of Australia, and the difference now is that you have new route options. You have boats, so you can get your ferry boats, and you have several of them available to you, and you can place them on the map as like similar to how you put up the trains and give you access to different routes. Multiple boats can be on the same location, so they're not blocked if you do that. Um, and they will give you access to new places to access. Like there's islands and areas that you couldn't get to otherwise. They're part of your route. You can pass energy back and forth across them. It just costs more to place them if other people are already in that location. So it's really just like a new way to interact with the map, to block spaces, to make things more expensive for people, just kind of complicate the process. The other thing you can do is there are now coal mines on the map. So a coal mine, previously, if you wanted to power something, you would need to import coal, and that would cost money. Or you would need to have Nucleum already available to you that you'd mined by taking various actions, by putting mines out or taking other actions to get them. Now there are coal mines on the map that you can excavate, and you leave your guy behind there, and then those will give you coal income as long as you have that in your network when you power something. So each coal mine that you are the owner of gives you one free coal on your round. So it's just a way to kind of build up your energy base. It give you more options. Um, there's also a little player board that you get that when you take those coal tiles, you can place them down. If you get enough, you get bonuses just for having extra coal tiles. That is essentially all that the game adds. Now, that's not a bad thing in my view. I was not expecting like this big essential expansion that was going to overhaul the game because I didn't think the game needed it. Like it's a solid game. It was rated very highly for us at the end of the year. It's a buy for me. I didn't think we needed to see the game completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
So tweaking it, giving us a different way to play it, assuming you played it a lot, I think is a good way to do it. It's kind of a heavier game than like a Power Grid or a Concordia. So I don't think people are playing this game like 30, 40 times like they would with those. And they're like, oh, I need a new way to play this game. And those ones also come with multiple maps just out of the box. So it's kind of designed already that way. So it's a little bit of an in between. Um, and it's not just the map, obviously. There are meeples in the box, there's little wooden boats, there's a lot of stuff in the box. So it's it's not quite to that level, and I wish it was, but with the discounts you get online, you can get a copy of Nucleum Australia for like $20. So it's not crazy expensive either. One other thing that they threw in here, which I don't think that you need the rulebook to know this, you can just do it, is an expert variant where you draft for the experiments. So the experiments are like the asymmetrical part of your player board, where you have your little tiles that you get throughout the game, and you can draft those by bidding victory points, which is a common way to do that in a lot of other Euros. We'll talk about one with one of the Splotter games later. Um, and I think that's always interesting because when you've played the game enough times, you'll look at those and be like, that one's better than that one. I want that one. Like, well, how many points will you give up to get that one? What's it worth to you? How much you want to handicap yourself? So that's a cool idea. That's essentially all you get here. It is very much an expansion for people who play a lot of Nucleum and want a slightly different way to play it. It's not necessary. It doesn't overhaul the game. It doesn't fix anything. It just gives new options, which I'm all for. So it's a play. It's still Nucleum. It's good. It doesn't break it. It doesn't make it too complicated. It doesn't add a fifth player or anything crazy like that. But it's worth picking up if you are a big fan of this game and expect to play it enough that you want some variety in how you approach the game. So, Nucleum Australia, check it out. I imagine we'll get more of these as long as this one's sold.
So is it the preferred way to play moving forward for you?
I mean, if I was playing with people who had played the game as many times as me, sure, because it's
Okay.
different. It adds like a couple interesting wrinkles. I wouldn't pull this out for new players though, because it's just there are two additional things you have to teach them on top of everything else.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a
like
lot.
you get like the boat building the boat thing is a separate. It's its own action. So you have your own action tile for that, which is separate. And when you play that action tile, you immediately play another one on top of it. So you take
Mhm.
two actions tiles on that turn. So it's a little wonky how that works. It makes perfect sense if you played the game a few times, but if you're new to the game, you're like, why would I get to go twice? Like, I can see that being confusing.
Yeah.
Um, so it's honestly it's like those higher level Concordia maps where I'm like, I would never pull this out unless everybody at the table had played Concordia a few times.
Sure. It'll be interesting to see the future. Obviously, this game has done well enough to allow for this, expansion.
Right.
Will there just be other maps? Like we got the system, maybe a tweak here and there, but like you said with Concordia, it's just maps and maps and maps, which is not bad because maps get tired, right? You know what the best spots are, where you have to build towards.
Right. And then occasionally you get a salsa or a Venus
Yes,
in between the maps. So maybe we'll get a Nucleum salsa, whatever. Who knows what that looks like?
sounds delicious.
Yeah. Glowing green salsa.
It'll be the Mexican map, I think.
Right.
So
But yeah, it's worth checking out if you like the game.
I do like the game, so I might check that out
Then
then.
check it out, man.
I will. I'm excited now. Although the map does not look like Australia, so
No, but the other map doesn't look like England either. So, or France or whatever it's supposed to be.
unless it's an alternate timeline where that's what those countries look like.
Yeah,
I mean, there's Nucleum after all, so could happen. Or maybe that's
that's
what
true.
happened to the land because of the Nucleum.
Yeah, yeah. There's some like weird lore building up in this game too. Like, there's the island of Tasmania has a mad scientist who conducted his own experiments to replicate uh, the invention of Nucleum. So there's like an experimental power plant in Hobart. I'm
Okay.
like, what a weird little bit of lore they're building here for this world that doesn't need to exist, but I love it. It's a cool thing to do. Um, maybe we'll get some like expanded universe Nucleum stuff. Like this mad scientist also has like some half human hybrids running around in the jungle. Who knows?
Yeah, everybody wants to have their own cinematic universe eventually, so just in case they tuck it in there.
Yep, they're working on it.
Nobody reads it. No
Yeah,
one goes to it. Sometimes it's kind of sad because you have like flavor text or you have stuff in the rule book and it's like this really elaborate story that does not play out in the game, so no one knows that thing exists. And yeah, it's there for some reason.
yeah,
So
yeah. I looked it up because I was like, why is this Nucleum already printed on the board? Like that's weird. And I was looking through it. I'm like, oh, because there's a mad scientist. Okay, I dig that.
yeah, mad scientists always kind of just it's the ghost in the machine, supposedly.
Yep.
But all right. Well, speaking of, I guess, board games with story or lack thereof,
Mhm.
I played After the Empire, which is a game about fiefdoms. And you are a liege who's in charge of this castle that gets built up. And you are there to serve the incoming refugees, to support them, to utilize their resources and their special skills and to fight back the nondescript hordes that are attacking the castle. So there is very, very thin, very general backstory behind this. That's not necessarily bad. It's medieval castles, and in particular, you're not here for the story, you're here for the castles. Now, I remember seeing this game on Kickstarter. I was like, ooh, looks like very nice pieces. but I wasn't too sure about the gameplay. Like games that have like flashy piece components where you build things up, it tends to be the only thing about the game. I passed on it. It showed up on GameFound and was a little more expensive. And I was like, come on, come on. No, I don't want to pay more for this. And then at some point, it came up for sale. I think it was like 50% off or something. I was like, okay, I'll do it. But of course, it did not have its little cool plastic figures and really awesome materials, little plastic materials like the gold and the stone. All those materials actually had like they were crafted, right? They had like bumps on them to like represent the actual materials. Instead, what I have is the traditional basic copy with everything has cubes. Now it's not bad because I'm a Euro gamer and I do not have a problem with cubes, but I do miss at least the resources that had all the different textures to it. Nonetheless, the castles are still here. And really, this game is all about building up your castle. So basically, the setup of the game is you'll have this vast board that represents all the different things that you can add to your castle. Now, I should say at the start, there is, I would say, there's no player interaction here, other than, again, you're taking from the same market as somebody else. But you are not attacking other castles or working with other castles. You're just pulling the same resources from, I guess, a board or the land. Now, what you'll find out there is refugees who are seeking asylum. And these different refugees have special abilities that, if you're able to pay the resources, you can add them to your castle. And they give you opportunities to build, parts of your castles that are cheaper, produce food, produce knights or mercenaries. Your typical knights, warriors stay with you through the whole game, even when they get injured. Your mercenaries come and then they go. So they're just there for that particular round of the battle. There's also buildings that you can add to your castle. So maybe you want to add an inn or a bathhouse or a feast hall. A lot of these are, again, adding some of the same things over, right? Adding stone, adding wood, adding food, adding iron. These are the basic resources of the game, or knights and mercenaries again, or they have a particular special ability that allows you to keep the attackers away and gives you, maybe knocks them out of the game. Beyond that, it's typical worker placement. You have your workers, and you'll get to place them on spots on the board. The different spots will give you different resources. So again, the same things we talked about with the cards: stone, wood, metal, for the mines, and then an opportunity to be able to hire knights or mercenaries, and then also an opportunity to game bonus end game cards. Primarily, the game comes down to one thing: can you survive that round's horde of attackers? And if you don't get sacked, you gain additional money. What's the game about? It's about money, people. So whoever has the most money at the end of the game wins, but you will be spending money throughout the game to gain additional resources. But primarily, it comes down to the four walls of your castle, which that start off as wood. You can build additional castle turrets that'll also add to some defense. And then you also have an opportunity to build an upgrade to stone. Stone's pretty awesome, much more hardy. And the stone turrets, they won't come down. So even if they get attacked, you're fine. But what's actually attacking you is all of these armies. So basically, at the start of the game, one card's flipped up to let you know which one of these armies is going to attack you from a particular side. The sides are kind of randomized based on how you shuffle the deck. And then there's a siege. There's a siege engine that also attacks your castle to start off with. The siege does damage to your castle, but also has an opportunity, again, based upon the card, it could also allow the attackers to jump the wall with ladders and get in and just do some bad stuff. So the invaders, you'll know one, and then as the game goes on, other invader cards will be hidden, so you won't be sure where they're attacking from. Again, you have your knights and mercenaries. You'll be able to put them on the walls. When you do so, they'll act as archers. and take out the bad guys. And if the bad guys actually get into your castle, you'll be able, during the move phase, to move your guys to the courtyard, and they'll fight hand-to-hand melee combat. So primarily the game is just wash, rinse, repeat. You do your worker placement, you prepare for the incoming army, you'll put your people out, you'll upgrade your castle, you'll try to meet the special ability cards at the end of the game because they'll give you additional money. And then, again, depending on how many players that you're playing, the real challenge comes into how much money you're making during the game, because the richer players tend to be the one that gets attacked, and gets attacked by the most armies possible. So if you have 22 money and they're attacking the person who's the richest there, it's a bad day for you because you're going to get hit with the largest army possible. But there's also a catapult marker in the game that advances each round. So you can't stay back at 0 or at 5 or 10, because eventually that marker is going to pass you. And even if you're lowest on the gold, you're going to get tacked as if you had more gold. So the game goes on, you're generating gold, you're safeguarding your castle, you're gaining gold based upon your castle not being sieged. Wash, rinse, repeat, multiple rounds, game comes to an end. So After the Empire was a game that I was just, I had it for a couple of years now, and I was just so wanting to get to the table because it had this great table presence, and I love castles and I love building them. I enjoyed the game because, again, I love castles, I love building castles. The actual attacking gameplay reminded me of Kingsburg, where, again, you had these hordes of whatever they were attacking you, and you had to prepare for them by having enough military. This is kind of similar to that, but again, just like a worker placement game, that's the only time where you're going to interact with other players. So it's a little hard. So beyond that, and a little asymmetry as far as a starting card that everyone gets, that's about it. So that starting card, some worker placement spots, the horde might hit you, might not, might hit everybody. You hold them off, you score gold, and you're basically solo gaming it. So After the Empire is fine. It's a play. I enjoyed it. It's nice to get to the table, but it doesn't offer any kind of complexity or depth or building story. It's just more people attacking you throughout. So I would have liked to seen an expansion for this that had maybe some more asymmetrical game powers or play styles, or some, either attacking other people's castles or cooperating with other people's castles. As it is, you're just going to play by yourself. It doesn't have a solo mode, which is odd. I guess it's there. It doesn't have a solo mode because a lot of the cards attack the highest player, which would always be that solo player. But it should have, because I think that would have worked best. So After the Empire, play it if you see it at the table. And if it's at the table, you'll know because there'll be castles there.
Yeah, castles. I mean, big castles and a play sounds like a win to me.
Yep, it's from Gray Fox Games. All right, everyone. So that's everything that hit our table this week. Now, on to our feature review. So our feature review this week, as we talked about earlier, is the coolest of cool games. It is the deepest and most, I would say, beyond, right, Anthony, you would agree with this, beyond 18XX. Like, this is the most complex, heavy Euro games out there from, like, a company.
I think so. Like,
Yeah.
on average.
On average.
Yeah, they're heavier games.
Oh yeah.
At the top of the pile, but Splotter games are, with a couple of exceptions, are generally very complex. Yeah.
So they enjoy that. I think they enjoy
Yeah.
They enjoy the fact that they're like, ha ha ha, we have the crunch. So
I think the three things that define a Splotter game to me are: one, decently complex, right? The games have meat to them, even when they're not overwrought with rules. They're fairly complex. Two, a lot of player interaction, like far more than you're used to in like a big heavy Euro.
mm-hmm.
These games ask you to be mean to each other, and pretty much across the board. Like, Splotter games will make you mad. And three, they're not the prettiest things to look at. Pretty much in general. There are two exceptions to this, and they are published by different companies, which we'll get to. But if it comes directly from Splotter, it's maybe not the prettiest thing in the world. They're not all terrible, but some of them are. So
Yeah,
there's also that. Like, but those three things, if you say those three things, I'm like, oh, you're talking about a Splotter game.
absolutely. And they can be punishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That complexity combined with the player interaction, like you can feel like you've lost the game in the first 40 minutes. And that's rough. And that's like that 18xx feel of like, okay, well, crap. Like, this is not good. What I've done here is bad.
Yeah, these are certainly the games that your mother warned you about when you
Yeah.
got into board gaming. Like, stay away from those Splotter Spelen games. They're
Yeah. They'll get
bad
you.
news. uh,
Uh,
all right, Anthony. So, what do we have up for us?
All right. So I mentioned back in the early days of Splotter, they released a lot of stuff. We're not going to talk about a lot of these games because most human beings haven't played them. So if you go back to the very earliest days, you have games with names such as Oraclos and Web and Gossip and Camelio. And many of these games, they might have printed 20, 30, 40 copies. Who knows? They were sold at out of their garage or at Essen or whatever. But the one game that kind of popped up in that like early batch, there's two of them really, but the one first is Bus. Bus is a game of pick up and deliver. Of you are trying to get these different people to different locations on this map with a bus. And the thing about the game, there's two things really that kind of stand out. One is it has one of those early worker placement mechanisms where you place your workers into different locations to take actions, and then they activate in that order. So we saw it in Dominant Species. This is one of the first games to have that. So like early worker placement mechanism. Two is again that interaction, right? The whole goal of the game is to swoop in there to get your network in there, and then to grab those passengers to score those points. Um, so if you have more buses, you can carry more passengers. When you run those buses, you get more points, but then you're taking less of other actions. So it draws in a lot of things that you might recognize. It's got some similar, Catan style layout and placement where you have like, the bus station and then the road that goes with it. And then the way in which the passengers come out and the control that players have over that drives a lot of the interaction in the game. This is one of the ones that we have the original artwork, which I kind of like. It's like almost this kind of surrealist watercolor look to it. Um, it's very very funky looking. And then there's a new version of it, the complete edition that was released by Capstone Games originally back in 2019, and then now they're reprinting it again because that was the 20th anniversary. Now it's the 25th anniversary. So if you didn't get that back then, you can now get it again. They're printing it again. So uh, Splotter games tend to go out of print. So if you are interested in Bus, pick it up while you can from Capstone because that is the only way to get it. And when that 20th anniversary edition came out, the game had not been available forever. So check it out while you can.
I remember seeing this and going, I do not want to play this. Like, I want no part of this because basically it's a bunch of meeples, and I mean like a handful of meeples and a bunch of sticks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how is this a game? Like, seriously. And look at this map. This map is a thing. Like, I don't know what it is. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying it's bad, but I'm saying you're handing me a bunch of sticks and you're telling me this is a modern Euro game.
Right.
And I love it.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah.
It is. It's one of those games that's actually relatively easy to teach. It doesn't take terribly long. And it is super mean, but it's not like 3 hours long like Food Chain. So I don't know. Like I picked up a copy of the 20th anniversary, and I'm really glad I did. I really enjoy it.
Same.
All right. So the other game that came out in 1999 that we still talk about is Roads and Boats. This also had a 20th anniversary edition release back in 2019. That one was directly published by Splotter. So I did get a copy of that in the mail. It's a big, long coffin style box, not super deep, but long. And it comes with the Ancetra expansion. And this game is just it's sandbox, right? It comes with like plastic overlays and pens, and you are drawing routes, literally drawing routes onto the map. You are placing out these dozens and dozens of little chits representing all these different things. You're quite literally producing goods, moving them, upgrading those goods, moving them, producing, upgrading, moving. It's a pick up and deliver kind of almost like a farming style game, but it's they call it a civilization building game, but it's almost exclusively focused on just building up the infrastructure, getting those resources, right? So you start the game, you have 3 donkeys, a bunch of wood boards, some stones, and 2 geese, and you got to turn that into your little empire. Um, and it's a puzzle, which I love about it. It's such a fun little puzzle, but it is obtuse. It is fiddly as heck. It's a weird take on civilization and industry game, but I personally feel like it works really well for the type of games that I enjoy. I could easily see somebody playing this and being like, "What the heck?" So, but it's a good one.
I've never played this one, but our friend Dave, our original friend Dave, who used to do the podcast with us for a bit, he always talked about this game. He would always be like, "I got roads and boats. You're gonna, you're gonna get." Yeah, he's like, ah. He never really wanted to get too much into it because I think he understood like feelings would be hurt by playing
Yeah,
that game. So
it it's it's tough, right? It's very long. This is not short like Bus. Bus, like I said, is I don't know, like a hour and a half. I think they say 2 hours, but I wouldn't even say it's that long. This is like 2 to 4 hours, and it's probably high on the high end of that. Like the last time I played it, it took us 4.5 hours. Um, it's a lot. There's a lot going on. But if you like puzzles, if you like working things out, it's got that feel for sure.
nice.
All right. Next up, we have a game that has been out of print and staying out of print to our knowledge. I guess not one that people are you know chomping at the bit for, but it's interesting, and I would love them to come back to this. If not this game, then something like this. But I don't know if they will. It's called 1830 BC. So this is the Splotter guys doing an 18xx game, but kind of deconstructing it and working backwards. So it has a lot of the characteristics of 18xx, right? So there are private companies, independent nations. There are routes that you're trying to build, but instead of like train routes, you are actually routing water. So you're trying to divert water from rivers into irrigation channels and get it to certain land. And to benefit everybody, right? So nobody owns the rivers, nobody owns the land. You're just trying to get in there and you try to have the most influence within that space. Um, there's technology that goes with that to make that a more efficient process. Uh, it's just an interesting idea. It's a fascinating approach to 18xx that I don't think anybody's really tried since. Like most of these games take the Francis Tresham formula of 1830 and they just turn it into a very similar but slightly different game set in maybe 10 years later, right? This is set 3,500 years earlier and is a completely different approach. So I don't think the game did super well. I don't know that they sold too many copies of it, and the ratings on Board Game Geek are not amazing, but it's just creative and interesting and different. And I would love to see kind of a new take on this sometime down the line.
Yeah, it's again, it's one of those things where it's another Grail game out there, and there's very few Grail games out there. But it would be nice to see this come back in print, just to get a chance to play it.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have a game that I know we've both played, so we can both talk about it. Antiquity.
Ah,
So this is the. I mean, Roads and Boats probably has the most stuff in it, but this one's like the most packed. It's heavy. You can feel it.
yeah,
It's just like it's a big brick of stuff. And so this is a game in which you are again building out a civilization, but it's different in that you are directly interacting with the environment,
hmm
both positively but mostly negatively. Um, and you're building your city at the same time, kind of as like an inset of that broader environmental impact. It's a weird game. Um, it's one of those games that like it's way too complex and long to like even bring it in or show it to my students. But I'm like, this is a cool way to look at environmental impact of growth.
yes.
I wish there was a more compact way to do that.
Yeah, this was ahead of its time. Now we're constantly now talking about environmental games and how games have a particular environmental impact and how we can kind of play that out. And then here you have a situation where it is a civilization building game, but you deal with famine, you deal with pollution, and you deal with death. You
Mm,
actually have to bury people in this
yeah.
game. And how you deal with pollution actually, in fact, can win you the game because you're messing with other players at the table.
Hmm.
And this game, as you mentioned, Anthony, like as far as Pact is concerned, this game and another one we're going to talk about shortly, it's got to have the most pieces to punch out of
Yeah.
any game in the world. Like it's just it's endless punching of little tiny pieces.
And the box lid will never fully close.
No.
It can't.
And you'll see a lot of people in photos actually using tweezers to put the game pieces on the board.
Yeah, there's a lot tiny little bits.
Yes.
It again, it's like a fiddly, ridiculous monstrosity that is also a masterpiece of game design. So
Yes. 100%.
uh it's such a weird game to describe to people.
Mhm.
All right, next up we have Indonesia. This is a game that has been reprinted several times, and it is a game about building up kind of a shipping company in Indonesia. So you are working with these different locations and building up like resources that are native to the area, and you are not a Western trading company coming here to take everything and do the usual thing that we get in board games. Um, you are a businessman from the area, so it is built within the space of Indonesia, and it's built within the actual goods that were produced and how those goods were produced. Um, it's a complex economic transportation based game with a ton of math because everything you do will involve calculating out different elements and the multipliers to figure out how much something is worth. Everything's about the money, obviously. Um, are are like sevens and nines always. So like the numbers that come out of here is always difficult. Like 17 times seven. I'm like, oh, come on, man. Um, it's it it's a game that took several times playing for me to wrap my head around fully. And part of that is like the design of the board and the design of some of the elements is a little difficult to read. Like they use like this cursive script that's very difficult to read. And despite multiple editions of printing it, they still keep doing it. Whatever. Um, this one never really stuck with me as much as a lot of their other games, and I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe just because the interaction's a little bit less and the economic crunchiness is a little bit higher, but I could appreciate it what it's doing.
Yeah, this game is another one where it's tiny little pieces on a very big board, but somehow there's so many tiny little pieces representing all the goods out there, which are like rice, spices, rubber, microwave meals for some reason, and oil. So it's stacks and stacks of little pieces, and basically it's about mergers and acquisitions, and you're researching new and new resources to put out there. Look, all of these games sound like if economic death to you. I get it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
did
yeah.
it did to me. And I sat down and played this and I was like, how can I light this store on fire and exit without anyone knowing? Right. Like I need to get out of here. But you play it, and eventually when you get it, and it's gettable. It certainly is gettable. It's fun. It's really dynamic. And I again, it's just shocking. It's just
Yeah.
shocking. You're like, they did it. I don't know they did it. It's fine. All right. You guys win. I'll play another one of your insanely complex games somehow. I feel smart, intimidated, but smart at the same time.
Right. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Intimidated but smart.
Yes.
That's how I feel with all these games.
Mhm.
All right, next up we have Greed Incorporated. This is another game that's not super in print all the time, but I wish it was because it's another one of those interesting rhetorical exercises. In the game, you play as a CEO of a company or an executive of a company, and you are trying to pump up the value of the company as much as possible, right? And so you're effectively cheating at business and economy in general. You're just trying to inject as much capital and value and money into this business as possible. But the key to the game is you need to get out of that company, like extract yourself, get your bonus, and leave because the companies will eventually crash. You push them too hard, all the cards come crumbling down because it's greed Inc. It's capitalism. Nothing lasts forever. It all collapses under its own weight eventually. So, um, it's got this feel of like, oh, you're building something up and you're trying to maximize value, and it's this economic euro, but it keeps going beyond the point that a lot of games stop at. You're like, yeah, I'm the most valuable company, I win. Or like, no, the game keeps going. That company is too valuable. That company cheated a bunch. Government's coming after them. Crash and burn, you lose. Um, it's just an interesting, fascinating approach to it. So it's got some negotiation, like auction type elements to it. But it's for whatever reason, not one that's come back, despite the fact that the production's fine. It's got some interesting visual cues to it, very 1980s look. But and it's maybe just something about like all those stock and commodity grids on the board. But I don't know. I wish this one would come back. I would probably pick it up.
It's a spreadsheet, man. It's a spreadsheet.
It it is, but it's like a very interactive, mean spreadsheet.
Yes. Gotcha.
All right. Next up is The Great Zimbabwe in
Mhm.
2012. This is prob it's not their lightest game, but it's up there and it's relatively easy to teach. So the thing about this game is that you are building up a civilization in ancient Africa, right? So it's the game itself is based around like the old kingdoms that were around the Great Zimbabwe, which is the World Heritage Site in South Africa. And you are trying to produce goods and trade them and develop resources and get the most victory points. But the trick with the game is at the beginning of it, you will, well, maybe not even at the beginning, but at some point in the game, you're going to take on special abilities as well as a god. And those things are going to adjust your victory point condition. So you start at 20, but some of these things are like +5, +8, plus not whatever. And now your victory point condition is going up because you have taken on these additional powers that are definitely not balanced, but the game adjusts for that by making the game harder for you to play. Right? So like one of them, Zango, just doesn't do anything. You get no special ability, but you can win with 2 fewer victory points. You only have to get to 18. Or Atete allows you to use resources twice, but now you have to get to 25. Like that victory point condition jumps up by 5. So which of these you decide to take, and you can take one, and you don't have to take it right away. You can choose when you take it. So you can kind of wait a round or two and see what other people do and then take one. Is such a big part of the game. The actual mechanics of the game are interesting as well. Like you have this big grid map and you are trying to reach different locations. The resources need to be accessible from the location of the trade good that you've placed on the map that then needs to be accessible to the tower that you're building up, which is how you score those victory points. At a certain point, it always turns into a race of who can get those resources faster within the context of like their abilities. But the first half of the game is where most of the interesting things happen, and I've always had a blast with this one. It's you can't really become super good at it until you've played with all of the different combinations, and there's a lot of them. And the nice thing is the game takes like 90 minutes. It's not super long, especially once you know it. It's relatively quick. The hardest part about teaching it is just getting people to wrap their brain around like how the grid works and how like routes work to get to those resources, how you access them. Like and the water gets involved and like the water cuts down the amount of space you have to travel. It becomes a whole thing. But great game. This is my favorite. Like a personal favorite, top of my list in terms of like top 100 is the Great Zimbabwe.
Nice. Not my favorite, but I appreciate it.
All right, next up is Food Chain Magnet. This is the one that introduced me to Splotter, and I think through you because you played it with your again. You mentioned Chris getting this over early, and I was like, "That sounds cool." And then when I saw it, somebody brought it to a game night. I'm like, "I should play that," and I had a terrible time because I got annihilated. Um, but the next day, I couldn't stop thinking about what I could have done differently, and I'm like, "Well, that's a good sign." And so the next time I saw it, I played it again, and I was like, "Oh, that's better. I didn't lose as bad." So uh, everybody knows Food Chain Magnet to some degree. This is you are building up a fast food chain, and you are trying to be the most efficient and effective as possible. It's another economic game. It's another highly interactive game. It's another game where you can mess with each other a lot. Um, big box with a lot of stuff in it, but it packs a punch.
It's certainly that type of game where throughout the whole game, you start to see or you start to realize, oh dear God, I'm in trouble. Not the face, not the face, not the face. So,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's a lot to wrap your brain around, especially some of the logistics are challenging, and certainly the employee planning that you have to do. But also, obviously, I mean, there's just like a lot of parts to it, right? You have the
right.
employees and how they come out is it's a whole game by itself, right? Like if I get certain employees, they'll allow me to play other employees, and I'll have to get other things and such. And then there's the placement on the board. And that's, man, that takes your breath away because, like, you have your restaurants properly placed, and then someone else places a rival right next to you. But so now you have to think about money. So, how close am I versus the opponents? Do I sell for less? Do I add another food item to the market through advertising? But now I have to be able to produce that too. Otherwise, I can't get the food to them. And then breathe. And then you still have another 3 hours to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's
it's got a very whimsical design, and
sure.
it's such a throwback to that 50s diner iconic look to it that it keeps its charm. You don't
Yeah.
feel like you're not enjoying yourself while you're playing it. But certainly when I played it multiple times, there is somebody who's like, I'm just out of this, and they have to stay. But most people find it enjoyable.
It's I anytime someone's like, "Oh, I can't do that." I'm like, "Fair, man. Fair. This is a lot."
Yeah,
But I think charming is the best way to put it because it has a feel to it that I
sure.
enjoy. Despite the fact that the game is very cutthroat and you get mad. I get mad playing this game
Mhm.
sometimes, but it just feels nice. It's cozy.
It does, and, like, the pieces are colorful and bright, the board is a little bland, but it's easy to navigate, so there is something to be said about the appeal of this version of the game. And then,
Yeah.
obviously, Lucky Duck has a super deluxe version, which we should not speak about because
Yes, yes.
it's beautiful and expensive at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very pricey.
Yeah.
um So with that one goes the only major expansion. There's been some smaller little things like Ancetra for roads and boats. But this was a big box $100+ expansion for Food Chain Magnet, the catch-up mechanism and other ideas.
Yes.
So it was I can't even remember how many modules they threw in here. It was like 9, 10. Um, you had new milestones, you have coffee and baristas they threw in, new district types, lobbyists, 3 new types of food, kimchi, sushi, and noodles, new types of marketing, new employees. Uh, you have the option to play with 6 people instead of 5. The ketchup mechanic itself, that's in there. So it was just a lot of new stuff. I have not played with the vast majority of this because this came out like end of 2019 and just did not hit the table nearly enough because of the pandemic and the group that I normally played this game with.
Mm.
But what I have touched on, very good.
I've played the vast majority of this, and obviously the pun here is perfect, right? The catch up mechanic, because what it's here to do is to loosen the game up.
Hmm.
So a lot of the modules here allow for flexibility, whether it's selling food to customers that you normally wouldn't be able to, or navigating, expanding, changing the maps, which is good, or being able to produce more food or to hold more food. So I would always play with the expansion. I appreciate the cutthroat and the tightness of the original game, but I think it certainly bogs it down a little bit.
Right.
I think the openness of this is not crazy. It's not it doesn't blow it up to the point where you're like, "Oh, and you can do anything." No, no, no. It's still an incredibly cutthroat, heavy strategy game, but now you have options to build out. And I like that because I like games when it gives me different paths to victory. And that's really what it does here. And again, like you mentioned, Anthony, there's different modules, so you don't have to play with everything. You could
Right.
pay with something that like, hey, everyone has a problem with this aspect of the game. Oh, cool. So let's add this module that addresses that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
All right, we have one more, and it's again, it took them 4 years, but they gave us a new game last year, Horseless Carriage. So this is a game. It at first you're like, oh, it's about making cars, and it is, but it's about the time when cars were first being made, where everything was just random and chaos. Nobody really figured out what a car should look like yet. So there's like random levers and pedals and random like wheels everywhere for accelerators. We hadn't all decided like, yeah, you press a pedal for the gas. Yeah, it could be anything. You can pull this button down and pull this string, uh, turn this crank, the car speeds up. So it's like you're building out a car and you're building out your own industrial setting for this car, uh, but they're all going to look very different. So it looks chaotic on the table. There's a lot going on, a lot of different types of tiles. It looks very Splotter. Um, and it's another really big box that's full of a lot of cardboard and tiles. It's not quite antiquity heavy, but it's close.
Yeah, I got a chance to play this and played through it a couple of times. It's different. It's different for them. It's a little bit more reasonable as a teach, and it's a little bit more reasonable as far as the number of actions that you have to take, and everyone kind of follows in the same order. So it's not like someone's building, 3 or 4 stages down for you. You're all taking the same actions, whether it's to research or to market or to build up your factories with different pieces. It is a little challenging. It's got a polyomino thing to it. So you got to be into the polyominoes because they're not the highest quality, so a little tap or a bump and they kind of move, and that's a little disturbing. Or just generally, if you don't properly place them, you lock yourself out because how they're
Mm,
connected is essential to the game. But again, the game has a lot of competition. I don't think it's groundbreaking, as far as like how the interaction goes. It's mainly about getting the cars that you want off the factory line. So whoever gets those cars off based upon what areas they're, circling, great. But otherwise, it's a relatively it's a more standard game. It's a more reasonable game in comparison to their other games. So I would say if you wanted to get into their games, but you felt a little overwhelmed by the number of choices and actions and the competitiveness, this is probably more or less their best entry level weight game. Where and when I mean entry level, I mean entry level for heavy gamers. I don't
right.
mean that for I don't mean that for for entry level gamers. Don't scare them away. For gamers who've played Euro games who might want to get into a Splotter, this would be a good first step. There's others, but this is a good first step.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot. I mean, I feel like the overhead here is going to be challenging for a lot of people, but
Yeah,
that's a Splotter game. Like
it's a Splotter game.
if you really want a light Splotter, you play Bus or Great Zimbabwe. But if you want to get the feel of like a big economic version of their games, then maybe this one.
Yeah, I feel like Bus is a. I love Bus, but I don't feel like it's a Splotter. I feel like it's and Bus, right? Like it's its own category.
It's mean. It definitely is mean. It's got that
Yeah,
going for it.
it's simple as far as placing pieces down, and you don't have
Yeah.
to calculate sales percentages.
Yeah. I think the thing that like when we think Splotter now, like we think economic, right? You're building an economic engine. Um that's what all the big ones are. Indonesia, Antiquity, even with the Civ building stuff, it's and fast food or food chain magnet and horseless carriage are all like economic engine type things.
hmm
So maybe this is just the most accessible of those.
It's
Because
yeah.
food chain magnet, Indonesia especially, those are very obtuse to start.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. They're overwhelming. If you haven't dipped your toe in, so to speak.
Right.
All right, everyone. So there you go. That's everything for this week. Until next time, this is Chris,
And this is Anthony.
and we'll see you all. Let's see at the table. Take care, everyone.
Bye.